Good morning. Let me say the case that we have been dealing with now for the last several weeks around Nolan Wells is indicative of many cases around the country that have raised serious questions with racial overtones. Attorney Crump and I are going tomorrow. I'm doing the eulogy for a young black man in Madison, Wisconsin, homeless, and they say had a knife, and there's the tape of him being shot, 3 cops surrounding him, shot and killed, 4 shots. And these cases building up in a climate of an administration in Washington that we cannot feel will objectively investigate. There was a time that we could say if state authorities fail us, we can go to the Justice Department. Even under George Bush, we went to the Justice Department. We, at this point, have to hope that one, we could deal with civil courts, or secondly, that there's a balance of power with the Democrats taking the House in November, and maybe the Judiciary Committee under that can at least put a check and balance on cases that need to be investigated. But we are right now where we have 2 parents, lovely parents, I've gotten to know them, that really don't have an answer to the question, is it a civil rights violation or not? And we do not know. How do you trust the words of people that say immediately there was no foul play when you haven't even investigated whether it was foul play? How do you trust people that come back from something that happened and never really give you a straight story of what happened, including you have the keys to the car? So when you have more questions than answers, you have to have people that will drive the answers out, and that's what we do. And that's why I've been involved, and that's why we stay involved. And it gets worse and worse and worse. The parent of one of the boys threatening to sue us for asking a question. Imagine that now. Some of y'all call us, what do you feel about the parents? One of the boys says he's going to sue you and Ben Crump. Sue us for what? For saying what happened? So we've gone back that far. And that is why we're going to stand with these parents, because usually, you know, I come from Brooklyn, New York. I was born and raised there. I don't come from the South. But my mother used to bring me down south to my grandmother in Dothan, Alabama. And Congresswoman, my grandmother told me, you see that pen over there? I said, yes. She said, that's a pen of hogs and pigs. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, always know something. If you take a brick and you throw it in that pile, the hog that hollers is the hog you hit. There's too much hollering going on in Mississippi that we haven't hit something. I can't figure out which one we hit, but we hit something. Because now they talking about lawsuits, they threatening a mother of a child, trying to get her job taken. You wouldn't be hollering if we wasn't hitting something. And we're going to stay on that, and we're going to stay on it all the way. In light of that, before attorney, and I call him the Attorney General of Black America, gives us the legal basis, and then we hear from the parents. Congresswoman who lived herself through dealing with the whole tragedy of her own son. That's how we met, on a plane. She was a flight attendant at the time. And she stopped me on the plane and said, Reverend, why ain't you dealing with my son's case? And we started a relationship. She ended up being elected right here in Georgia and reelected. They redrew her lines, and she was reelected anyhow. The lines couldn't reduce the favor of the people. Congresswoman Lucy McBath.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to say thank you to Reverend Al Sharpton, and also thank you to Attorney Crump for being the armor bearers for this family, the Nolan's family. It's a really, really sad occasion that we're here again. I was just saying to my staff on the way in, it's like this brings back so many vivid memories for me and my own family, having lost Jordan to unnecessary gun violence in November 2012, Black Friday, simply because he was black and playing loud music in his car. And so here we are again today, here for the loss of another black young man in our community. And we find ourselves asking the same questions. How did it happen? Why did it happen? And this family stands here demanding answers. This family deserves answers. I myself sought the same justice for my son Jordan that they're seeking for theirs, and they deserve answers. And they deserve justice. Justice that should not be denied this family, or should ever be denied to any of our children or our lost loved ones. As a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, I'm the second vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. We are demanding a full federal investigation. Kash Patel, we're demanding a full federal investigation as to what has actually happened to Nolan Wells. We want to make sure that every stone is unturned because his life matters. All of our children's and our families' lives matter. And we must fight back. We must stand up, and we must demand accountability for this family's loss. We cannot turn a blind eye to what continues to happen again and again and again. That's the reason why I ran for Congress, to make sure that we continue to put a face on what's happening to our families and our communities every single day. We must say Nolan's name. Say his name. Lift his name. And as the national black journalist of this country, you have the ability to be able to lift this story and not let it die. We see over and over again these kinds of tragedies in our communities that continue to happen. And they make it to CNN. They make it to MSN Now. They make it to our local news for maybe 30 days, if that. And then the stories are gone. And the carnage is left with the families and the communities that have lost someone that they love. So I thank the National Black Journalists. Thank you for lifting this family story. Do not let it die. Continue to say his name. Continue to tell his story, because they deserve justice, and it matters. It mattered for me. It mattered for Trayvon. It mattered for Eric Brown. It matters for all of our loved ones that we have lost.
As Attorney Crump comes, let me say, as Congresswoman McBath has said, the caucus has asked the federal government to look into it. For those of us that are worried about the politicalization of the present administration, that is why January becomes important, that we have a judiciary committee that can also monitor when investigation happens now or does not happen. So it won't end there. They may come out with any announcement they want in the next month or so. We having the big march August 28th in Washington, we must deal with voting rights, so we have the right people in, so we can check and balance. I want to say to people in Mississippi, whatever investigation you come with, once we have a fair and balanced government, your investigation will be investigated. It will not end with what they say in Mississippi. Attorney General of Black America, Benjamin.
Thank you so much, Mentor. Reverend Al, thank you for helping not only lead the effort to get to the truth, but keeping this family in your prayers as you have done so many more families, giving them support. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Eric Hertz, Attorney Lisa Park, Attorney Ahmad Smith. We have the honor of representing the family of Nolan Wells. Obviously, you all have come to know his parents, Christine and Elmore Wansley. And this is hard. I heard Congresswoman Macbeth, who lost her son Jordan almost 12 years ago, and it's still raw and emotional when you hear her talk about the loss of a child. I mean, he's not coming back, and that is the story. Everything else is just, hyperbole, is distraction. The story is what happened to Nolan Wells. Somebody knows something. Somebody saw something. I'm thankful to Reverend Al Sharpton and Mr. Tyler Perry and Terrell Owens and Byron Allen putting up these rewards. I understand others have now put up rewards, and that's good because that means we all have the same objective. We want the truth about what happened to Nolan Wells, and it is urgent. It is urgent because each day that goes by, you worry, will we ever get to the truth? And so that's why we want to thank CBC for calling on the federal authorities and anybody else who has resources to help this family get to the truth of what happened to their son. I know I was talking to Christian Clark, and she said, no, let's make sure that all taxpayers' money that goes to support federal resources apply to our children too. I mean, let's say that nobody should say, oh, it doesn't matter that much because it's a black child. No, it matters. All of our children matter. And so we are going to continue every day to say his name, Attorney Hertz, Attorney Park, Attorney Smith, trying to work with the local district attorney to give them what they need to do a thorough, fair, full, impartial investigation. That's what we're asking for. Everything else is just a distraction because Nolan's birthday is next Wednesday, August 19th. It is going to be extremely difficult for his mother, his father, and his family, because this August 19th will be like no other that they've ever had for the last 19 years. I mean, it's a milestone when your child gets to be 18 years old. You try to breathe a little easier, Reverend. Now you say, man, we almost got them there. They at the cusp of being an adult, cusp of manhood. And you heard how Elmore was working so hard, him and Nolan, his football career. I mean, he had a good start, but this was really going to be his year. I mean, so much hope, so much promise. And then July 4th came, and 4th of July will never be the same to Christine and Elmore. And on the 19th, next Wednesday, his family, we're all asking for prayer for Nolan. I know there's going to be a prayer visual in Ocean Springs. I know Reverend Al is going to work to make sure we're all praying all across the nation. But, y'all, let's pray. Can we pray together in unity to say, let's get to the truth of what happened to Nolan Wells? Can we do that, America? Can we at least come together in unity on his birthday everybody who claimed to ever be a friend of his, can we come together in unity and pray for the truth and try to have love in our hearts for this family, for this broken-hearted mother and father, his sisters and brothers? Can we try to give them grace and give them love and pray for their humanity, for their son who was lost on 4th of July and is never coming back? Is that so much to ask? Let's have a National Day of Prayer on August 19th, next Wednesday, for Nolan Wells. And at this time, you can hear from his mother and father, Eric, as we try to answer your questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for having us, for platforming our son's story. As many of you know, his 19th birthday is next Wednesday. And it's, as the days gets closer, it's definitely getting harder. That realization is really sinking in. That we don't have our son physically here anymore. And I think a lot of people have forgotten. Only thing we want to know is what happened. That's all we want to know, is what happened to our son. Because many parents out there, you still have your children. You still can hug them. You still can call them. You still can celebrate their life with them. And we do not have that anymore. Our lives have forever changed. This new normal is something I would never wish on anyone, not even my worst enemy. The hurt that we feel daily, the conversations that we have to have, not just with each other, but also with our other children as they are grieving as well. So we ask that everyone, please, next Wednesday, join us in prayer. As for us as a family, but also too for everyone out there, but especially for Nolan and the process that we're going through. And again, we thank you so much.
First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who's constantly keeping our son's story in the forefront. You don't know how much we really appreciate that. Nolan brought light to our family. He was the fun in it. And with his birthday coming up, like my wife said, we have to deal with a new normal. Who knows what these years are going to bring, but we know that these years on August 19th is going to bring a lot of hurt, some laughter as we think about memories, but as far as our family, a very big piece will no longer be there. We just want the truth. We just want to know what any other parent would want to know. We asking the questions any parent would ask. And if you feel that something's wrong with that, then that's a problem that you have to deal with. But as far as us and our family, we're just asking for truth, transparency, and to please keep us in your prayers. Next week is going to be a hard week, and the years follow are going to be hard.
Thank you very much, Christian and Elmore. It never gets easy, Reverend. And they're asking, I know Reverend Jamal Bryant is coming to Ocean Springs. Anybody who can come to Ocean Springs to be at the prayer vigil with them on a Wednesday evening at 7 p.m., please come. And if you can't come, please have prayer vigils in your city and your communities. We need to find out what happened. Attorney Hurts, Attorney Parks, and Reverend Allen, as we try to answer your questions. The family, obviously, the motion, they'll try to answer questions if they can. Any questions?
Yeah,
Hello, my name is Logan John, NABJ.
yeah, give us where you're calling, where you.
NABJ News.
Okay.
What do you believe accountability and justice for Nolan Wells should look like?
It's very simple. As we always say, if it was your child, what will accountability and justice look like? Well, that's the same thing they want for their child. Whatever it would be for your child, that's the same thing they want. Whatever investigation you would do for your child, that's the same investigation they want. We're not asking for anything special. We just want equal justice for our children too.
And I think that we must be very much emphasizing is they have said, again here with the press conferences and statements they made throughout when they started at our headquarters in Harlem speaking to the press, they're not trying to come to a conclusion. The other side did, saying that there was no foul play. They're trying to tell us what happened. And we're going to stand with them on that, and as well as other cases around the country. Yes, sir.
I'm Ezekiel Telemaco with ABC24. There's been a lot of misinformation and rumors spreading on social media. Is there anything that you guys would like to confront that you've seen that has stood out there?
Let me just say this. I wait real.
Well, I mean, I think that social media has distorted a lot. I think for myself and Ben, we're public figures that you're going to have social media lie on us every day. I don't even know if I'm really here according to social media. But what hurts us is the distortions they've done on the family, where they've harassed her in her job and sent stuff to their house, distorted with the father's question. They didn't ask to be public figures. They only are trying to get justice for their son. So I would just say, whatever social media people are trying to get likes and hits and all, do that against people like me that offered ourselves public. They didn't ask for this. All they want is what happened to their son.
And I'll simply say this because that question has come up, and I released a statement, and I want to be clear about it. We defend the First Amendment rights of content creators reporting on Nolan Wells' case. We stand with content creators, independent journalists, and citizens who are responsibly reporting on the Nolan Wells case and asking legitimate questions in pursuit of truth and accountability. The First Amendment protects robust public discussion on matters of public concern, and those protections are not reserved just for traditional media. We are deeply concerned when cease and desist letters, threatened lawsuits, or other legal pressure become tools to intimidate or silence lawful scrutiny. There is an important difference between knowingly spreading false information and asking questions. Examining, I want to make sure I get it exactly as we said. Okay. There's an important difference between knowingly spreading false information and asking questions, examining evidence, identifying inconsistencies, expressing opinions, and demanding transparency. Reporting should not be silent. Reporting should not be silenced, and legitimate questions should not be met with intimidation. Those seeking truth and accountability in the Nolan Wells case have every right to continue asking questions and demanding answers, because we are America and we have a right to the First Amendment that includes black people and all people.
Hi, Denise Clay Murray, Philadelphia Hall Monitor. My question is for Congressmember McBath. Has the formal request for the FBI from the Congressional Black Caucus been delivered to the FBI, and what deadline have you given them for a response?
We've actually we've actually written a letter, a formal letter, and it's already been executed. We've already sent it forth. We are giving them time to respond. We did not give them a specific deadline, but we did say that we are expecting to have an answer as soon as we possibly can.
Attorney Crump, Ryan Young from CNN. Thank you to the family again for standing here and talking to us. There's been a lot about the meeting that you were supposed to have with the DA's office and the cooperation that they were supposed to be giving. Can you update us and tell us whether or not the family has had any contact with the DA's office? Are they talking with you? Have the investigators put their arms around you at all?
Attorney Eric Hertz and Attorney Parker, please.
I'm Eric Hertz, law firm Eric J. Hertz, PC, and I am heading the independent investigation in this case. I think the first thing, before I get into the exact question, is what's worse than losing a child? Probably nothing. But what makes it horrible is not knowing, and transparency is the key. So with us going into this case as doing an independent investigation, we first thank all the people on stage, all the people that have helped, and we thank you, the media. We have had much communication with the district attorney, and I feel that is confidential. We have cooperated, I can tell you that, and we would just want to cooperate like anyone else would have to cooperate, and we're continuing to do that. It's a duty to our clients.
So just to address that specifically, you may already realize and already know there was a meeting on July 15th in Mississippi with the DA's office. At that meeting, there were several things discussed about the investigation regarding Nolan Wells and what happened to him. In that meeting, there were several things that were set out and agreed to, and we expect the DA, as well as our own team, to follow those agreements.
Yes, sir.
And Greg Dunmore from Post Speak Media out of Detroit, the ABC sister station TV 20. Evil prevails when good men and women remain silent when the facts come out, and they will come out. If it indicates that something sinister did not happen and it was a freak accident, will you believe that the truth is still not being revealed? Because if the truth is not going to indicate on some level that something sinister was done, will you not believe it to be something else if the truth is that it was not?
If the truth comes out,
yes,
and it's clear, then we will accept the truth. That's all we're asking. And we only have said that the people that are attacking them or raising the question of the truth say the same thing. I think that we've leaned over backwards in every press event, at the funeral, me doing the eulogy, saying we weren't going to prejudge. Yet they keep getting lambasted. Imagine this. You're losing your child and you're being attacked for asking what happened. I mean, they're not political figures. Why are they under attack for asking for the truth? So it's not about us accepting, it's about whether or not those involved can accept. Yeah.
Yes, Nolan with the Black Wall Street Times.
Well, they always try to shut us up. I will not be silenced. Yeah, it's on.
Yes, Nehemiah Franklin.
Don't move the mic. Okay.
Try this again. Okay. Yes, Nehemiah Frank with the Black Wall Street Times out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Condolences to you both. My question is for Mr. Wansley. When you went to Jack's house and he used the past tense and literally said to you, from what you've told us, the media, that the brother, or that he said that Nolan was like a brother a day before the body actually washed up, was that like alarm? Did it send any alarm bells through you at all?
Yes. You said
Put yourself in a father's shoes and you just found out that your child is missing. The only thing you want to know is where he is. Trying to go back and think about specific words at that moment, I wasn't thinking about that. My mind and my focus was finding my whereabouts of my son.
Hey, Tom Jones, reporter for WSB TV here in Atlanta. I keep hearing about this young lady that Nolan left with. Has anybody managed to find her, talk to her?
I think that what we're trying to carefully do is not impugn the investigation. So a lot of what may and may not have happened in terms of the dialogue with the lawyers and the family would not be prudent to testify on WSB Atlanta.
Hi, my name is Jahara Wilson with Gravity. You're calling on the Department of Justice to open an independent federal review of Nolan's death. What do you believe federal investigators could uncover that local and state authorities?
Let me clarify also, Congresswoman want to get some clarity.
Also, I do want to clarify that we've given them 7 days to respond. It was 7 days, so I'm sorry about that.
Your question was, what do we hope to get from them, the federal investigation? What anybody will hope. We are taxpayers too. It's the federal resources that can offer resources to help investigate the matter thoroughly. And so Nolan was not only Christine and Elmo's child, but when you think about it in a philosophical way, he was all of our children. But by the grace of God, it could be our child next. And as American citizens, we have the absolute right to say our federal government should extend resources for our children like they will extend to everybody else. I will never forget when President Obama, with Reverend Al and I, when Trayvon Martin was unalive, and he said that it's important that we extend all of the resources of the federal government to help this family get to answers of the truth. And that's all you would want if it was your child. That's all they want if their child. Every resource available, help us get to the truth.
And let me say that and answer that. It's important that you understand that when we raise these issues, that's all what we wanted. We raised the issue, I was out front, Ben was the attorney with Trayvon Martin, and we finally got George Zimmerman in court. When the jury said not guilty, we said we disagreed, but we didn't go and attack his parents. We didn't go and chase him down. We accepted that. When we had the killing in Missouri with Michael Brown, and President Obama was president, we asked for the federal government to come in there. Eric Holder and them investigated the case and said there was no federal case that they could bring. We accepted that. So don't act like we don't accept it. We accept it when Michael Brown's case didn't go federal. We accept things when they're fair. But we want them to be fair. That's why I said, as the congressman said, they're giving them 7 days. The FBI come back either way, but we want it reviewed by the Congress at some point. I'm on my way tomorrow to Madison, Wisconsin, to deal with Ruiz shot on camera. While I'm there's a company trying to get a contract that is in business with ICE. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. We look at it from a civil rights point of view. They're dealing with it from their son. This is fresh in blood.
Yes, ma'am.
Susanna Capiluto with NPR. Has the DA said anything to your attorneys regarding the joint investigation of the cell phone?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Has the DA said anything, given any guidance on a joint investigation of the cell phone?
We are in constant communication, and just like anything, like to address the gentleman sitting next to you. What was your name again?
Oh,
Greg.
Yeah. You get 2 shots. Yeah.
this is Greg Dunmore.
Okay. Just to address Greg's question, you know, the truth has to be proven and shown with the methodology, the way they came about. Someone just can't come out and say, hey, you know, I have a Ferrari, and then you believe they have a Ferrari. I don't have a Ferrari. The truth has to be shown. You got to bring them to your garage, show them the title. That's the truth. And yes, we will accept the truth. So the same way with what the young lady sitting next to you is saying, which is we have procedures that the courts require that we as lawyers ethically have to follow in order to turn over evidence. There's chains of custody. There's protected private information. And we are willing, in fact today, I'm not doing anything the rest of the day, to meet with the FBI and our person, our expert, to go over that phone. And we've made that clear. So we're ready to do that at any moment.
Lisa just want to say one last point on that.
I'm going to back up a little bit. So just to clarify, what the agreement was that the DA's office, and this is the Jackson County DA's office, as well as our forensic team, and possibly the FBI, were going to together download and examine the phone. So it's done one time with everybody together, right? This is very common in the law. I mean, what you all may be more used to is when there's a terrible car accident, and then there's an examination of that car, and everybody comes together one time. They don't move that car around, and everybody does their own thing. This is what is supposed to happen. We are waiting for the DA to determine the time, the place, the date. Let us know, and we are going to be there with our forensics team and anybody else, but it's done one time, one examination. We're ready for it to happen.
Julie Walker, Associated Press. Can you give us a sort of a timeline or what's next going forward, including any possible lawsuits that would be filed, not against you as you had mentioned before, but that you would be filing, and then the completion of the independent autopsy and how that's moving along, and anything else that would be moving forward? And I know you had mentioned you wanted that national day. Other than that, anything in the future?
Well, we want to make sure people understand we're going to follow the truth wherever it leads us. There's been a lot made about we want to come and bring some lawsuit. When Christine and Elmore called me, we weren't thinking about bringing a lawsuit. We were thinking about just helping them get to the truth. That is a vehicle that we can use to get to the truth if the facts tell us that. We send out preservation letters, and everybody said, oh, they're going to sue them. No. We send out preservation letters to preserve the evidence. Right. And in those standard letters, you say litigation is reasonably anticipated to say, don't get rid of the evidence. We're on record that we want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that's what's going to lead us in what we do. It's about the evidence, nothing else. And this family has always said from day one, even when I called Reverend Allen, we talked to him, they have been consistent. We want to know what happened to our child. Everything else is just, it's just clickbait and everything. It's about what happened to our child. Black press, NABJ, we need you now more than ever to keep everybody focused. What happened to this 18-year-old black teenager in Mississippi? Because there have been questions when you look at the history of the Deep South where young black people are unalive and nobody ever gets any answers. Well, we want Nolan Wells not to be like many others that came before him.
And that is why, as I said earlier, August 28th, the anniversary of Dr. King's March, Martin III and I called, we were doing a huge march in Washington, Lincoln Memorial. This will be highlighted in other cases because these things keep happening, and to protect the right to vote. So we intend to stay out on the battlefield as long as necessary. Yes.
And I'd asked about the independent model.
We understand that Dr. Roger Mitchell is made himself available at any point that the district attorney's office and the medical examiner will allow him to come. He's ready, willing, and able to go do it.
You mentioned just now that multiple cases have happened like this that are similar. What do you think about this case in particular being on race politics?
About this case in particular, what?
Being considered race politics.
I think that the race politics of this case has been the reaction. I think that we're not predetermining that the case was racial. We're determining that the answer, the investigation, has been racially divided, and that's what made it racial. Yeah, I'll take two more. This is a press conference, not a revival. We're not going to be here all afternoon.
Yes, sir. I know, so to be a loud voice. In particular, thinking back on what Attorney Trump said, is it the fact that he's happening in Mississippi why it seems to be so difficult to get answers in regards to the same right man's death?
Did you say Trump or rather than Crump? I'm just trying to. Yeah, we're praying for you at the prayer meeting.
I want to keep an open mind. I know there have been several attacks on us just for asking questions, and it's okay. I mean, when you think about Mississippi, they attacked all my heroes. The governor's predecessors, they attacked, Ida B. Wells, Medgar Evers, my personal hero, Thurgood Marshall, Dr. Martin Luther King, for saying that we're going to stand up for black life and black humanity and the right to black people to have the Constitution applied to them as American citizens. So I'm unapologetic in my defense of black life, black liberty, and black humanity. God has a calling on all our lives, and when you figure out what that calling is, you don't second guess it. You say, God, I know why I put on this earth, to be there to stand up for our people in times when they have nobody else to stand up for them. And so whether it's Mississippi or anywhere else in the deep South, or as Malcolm X said, I heard they discriminate against black people in the South. He said, I guess my definition of the South would be anything beneath the Canadian border, because last time I checked, they discriminate against black people all across America. And so what we're saying is we are open-minded. We want to trust them, but we can't be naive. We have to verify everything, as Attorney Hurt said. Whatever conclusions you come to, we want the methodology. Whatever investigation you're doing, we want to know that it's the same investigation that you would do with your child, not treat Nolan any differently. That's what we're trying to do. That's all we're asking.
All right, we're going to take one more, and then we have to take the family out. Jesse Jackson Jr., who has his own radio show.
I represent KDLA today. Let me ask a question, Reverend Sharp and Reverend Trump, and even the Congresswoman. Nolan Wells' body was found on federal territory, Horn Island, run by the National Park Service. Are you aware of any death investigation opened up by the National Park Service into his death on federal land? First question, actually two parts. There have been 7 arrests made for the swimming pool, also run by the National Park Service. Why the disparity between arrests over the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial and 0 arrests, subpoenas regarding the National Park Service in the case of Nolan Wells?
The answer, and I have the lawyer's answer, is that is why we raised it thanks to the CBC and Congresswoman, to a federal level, because the federal government has to answer those questions of involvement, because Horn Island is federal property. And while they can have a grand jury indict around the reflection pool, then announce they're pulling back the charges, now have with a new special grand jury. They done went to a pool twice and haven't come to Horn Island one time, and it was federal property. So I think that the contradiction there is why we keep raising the question.
And also, too, as a matter of record, you know, being in Congress, there is federal oversight. And I sit on Judiciary Committee in Congress. We also have the Senate Judiciary Committee. And oftentimes there are a lot of these kinds of investigations that come before us because we have the authority for oversight. So since this is considered, at this point, would be considered something of national federal interest, that is the reason why we're asking for the accountability to make sure that this is not just swept under the rug.
And I'll say in conclusion, thank you to the media. Now more than ever, the fourth branch of government, we need you. NABJ, we need you now more than ever. We're talking about Nolan Wells, but remember, there were two other 18-year-old black teenagers who were unalive in highly questionable situations. Tyler Smith and David Urban. And we need to be talking about these children. We got, you know, the young lady, Alyssa Hackett, who was, I mean, brutalized by a state trooper and who cursed her. I mean, she's a tiny black teenager. And, you know, Reverend Allen, as we were looking at the video, as a girl dad, I mean, if a police officer can't have an interaction with a black teenage girl without body slamming her, cursing her, and punching her in the face, what does that say about where we're at in America in 2026? This is about covering those stories, even when people who may run your news outlets don't want you to cover the stories. We need you to give us a voice in the tradition of Ida B. Wells. We can't have the police just writing the narratives and the reports. We need you all writing those narrative reports. And you got to challenge your white counterparts and say it. Ida B. Wells said famously, Reverend Al, the killers write the police reports. No, we need NABJ to write the reports and the narratives. Thank you.
A forensic pathologist stands in a hotel ballroom in Chicago and reads 7 words out loud that a mother has waited 18 days to hear. He cannot rule out non-accidental factors, not a cause of death, not a manner of death. Just that sentence, sitting in the middle of a report that answers almost nothing else. 2 autopsies have now been performed on 18-year-old Nolan Wells. Neither one can tell his parents how their son ended up in the water off a barrier island 10 miles from where he grew up. This is what we actually know, and what's still, after everything, we do not. Before we go any further, here's what we owe you every single time we bring you a story like this one. We tell you what's confirmed, we tell you what's disputed, and we tell you what's simply unknown. And we never blur those 3 things together to make a better story. Nobody in this case has been charged with a crime. Nobody's guilt or innocence is being decided in this video. What we're doing is walking to the verified record piece by piece, so that when you leave this video, you know more than you did 10 minutes ago, and none of it is guesswork dressed up as fact. And listen, if this is the first video of ours you've ever clicked on, we'd love for you to stick around for this channel. We've been putting a lot of hours into getting this case right instead of getting it fast. And honestly, way more of you are watching these videos and are subscribed to see the next one. So if you want to be here when the grand jury finally moves, hit that subscribe button right now before we go any further. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to a channel like this one. All right, let's get into it. Before this was a national news story, before it was a hashtag, before strangers on the internet were arguing about audio files and blood alcohol levels, Nolan Xavier Wells was just a kid trying to get through the summer between two versions of his life. He graduated from Ocean Springs High School that spring. Anyone who watched him grow up around the Mississippi Gulf Coast knew him as an athlete first, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of build that made him look older than 18 in photographs, but with a face that hadn't quite caught up to his frame yet. He'd committed to play football at Southwest Mississippi Community College as a wide receiver, and by all accounts, that summer wasn't a vacation for him so much as a countdown. He was supposed to report back to campus after the holiday weekend to begin training for the upcoming season. Friends and family describe him, consistently, as the kind of person who noticed when someone in the room needed cheering up and did something about it without being asked. That's not a detail we're inventing to make you feel something. It's the same word, uplift, that shows up again and again in interviews with people who actually knew him, from his mother to his former coaches to classmates who crossed paths with him for a single semester. He was, in the words of people who loved him, a special soul. Somebody who made rooms lighter just by being in them. He had two parents who by every account were deeply present in his life. Christine and Elmore, who go by the surname Wansley. Christine works in healthcare, a field where she has spent years sitting with other people's grief professionally, which makes the fact that she is now the one living inside it almost unbearable to sit with. Elmore has talked publicly about the hours he put in with Nolan on his football development. The drives, the training, the small rituals fathers and sons build around a shared goal. This wasn't a family drifting apart during a difficult teenage stretch. This was a family in the middle of what should have been one of the best summers of their lives. A son on the edge of adulthood, a scholarship locked in, a future that looked, from the outside, about as solid as an 18-year-old's future can look. On the evening of July 3rd, 2026, Nolan cooked dinner for his parents. That detail has been repeated in nearly every piece of reporting on this case, and it keeps getting repeated because of what it represents, not because it's dramatic on its own. A teenager, on the cusp of leaving home for a new chapter of his life, spent one of his last ordinary nights making a meal for the two people who raised him. After dinner, he told his mother he was heading out to spend the night at a friend's house ahead of the holiday. According to Christine, his exact words to her were simple. "Hey, Mom, I'm about to go. I love you." Then a hug, then a kiss, then he left. Nobody in that kitchen knew. It was the last ordinary goodbye they would ever have. That's the version of Nolan Wells' video I want you to hold on to before we walk through everything that happened next. Not a name and a headline, not a photograph circulated 1,000,000 times on social media, but a kid who cooked salmon for his parents on a Thursday night because he loved them, and who told his mother he loved her on his way out the door. We're going to be honest with you throughout this video. A lot of what follows is contested, unresolved, or actively disputed by people with very different interests in how this story gets told. But that one part, who Nolan was to the people who loved him, is not in dispute. Nobody on any side of this case has ever contested that. Horn Island sits about 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a barrier island inside the Gulf Islands National Seashore, which means it's federally protected land with no permanent structures. No running water, no cell towers, and no way on or off except by private boat. Every 4th of July, that emptiness fills up. Locals describe it as an unofficial gathering point, especially for young people who grew up around Ocean Springs and the surrounding towns. A place where high school classmates who scattered into different colleges and different lives all end up on the same stretch of sand for one holiday weekend a year. Reporting places a number of people on the island that day somewhere in the range of 2 to 300, many of them recent graduates like Nolan. The boat carrying Nolan and his friends left from a private dock in the Ocean Springs area at 9:56 in the morning, according to GPS data later released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. It arrived at the western tip of Horn Island at 11:14. From there, the day unfolded the way holiday weekends on the water usually do. Groups of boats anchored near each other, people moving between vessels, music, conversation, the ordinary chaos of a few hundred people trying to enjoy the same stretch of coastline at once. Somewhere in the middle of that afternoon, Nolan became separated from the friends he'd arrived with. The exact circumstances of that separation are one of the most contested details in the entire case, and we're going to walk through every version of it later in this video, carefully, without pretending any single account has been proven. What isn't in dispute is the outcome. When the boat Nolan had arrived on left the island that evening, he wasn't on it. His mother reported him missing that night. What followed was a search effort that, within hours, had escalated well beyond what a single missing person case usually involves. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources attempted 3 separate drone launches on July 5th to search the surrounding water and shoreline. According to the agency's own after-action documentation, the first flight was cut short by a software malfunction that couldn't be fixed in the field. 2 more drones were launched later that morning. The final attempt ended when overheating caused the battery to separate from one of the units, and further flights were canceled because of the heat. Even the search itself, in other words, was fighting against the same brutal Gulf Coast summer that had brought everyone to the island in the first place. The U.S. Coast Guard joined the search. So did the National Park Service, since Horn Island falls under federal jurisdiction. Local search and rescue volunteers, including organizations like the United Cajun Navy, poured resources into scanning the shoreline and the surrounding water. For 2 days, a barrier island that had been packed with holiday revelers just hours earlier became the site of a coordinated, multi-agency search for one missing 18-year-old. On the morning of July 6th, that search ended the only way nobody wanted it to. A National Park Service ranger discovered Nolan's body in the water along the shoreline of Horn Island. He was found face down. The Jackson County coroner would later confirm his identity through dental records, a detail worth sitting with for a moment, because it tells you something about the condition his body was in after 2 days in Gulf Coast water in the middle of July. Christine posted publicly that same day. Absolutely devastated, she wrote. My heart is broken for our sweet son, who is always willing to cheer and uplift others. Nolan was a special soul. An autopsy was performed the following day, Tuesday, July 7th, by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. The results were not made public. At that point, nobody, not the family, not the public, not even most of the investigators working adjacent parts of the case, had any idea that those results would still be unreleased more than 5 weeks later. That delay, and everything that's happened in the space it created, is a huge part of why you're watching this video right now instead of a 2-minute local news segment that wrapped up in the middle of July. Alright, before we go further into the investigation itself, we need to talk for a second. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't rush a case just to get a video out faster than everyone else. We'd rather be accurate a week later than confidently wrong today. And if that's the kind of true crime coverage you actually want, we genuinely appreciate you subscribing right now. We've noticed a lot of you watch every single one of these updates, but haven't hit that button yet. And honestly, it's the easiest way to make sure you don't miss the moment this grand jury finally moves. Alright, let's keep going. On July 6th, the same day Nolan's body was found, Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter spoke to reporters and said something that would follow this case for weeks afterward. His detectives, he said, were interviewing people who had first-hand interactions with Nolan on the day he disappeared. And at that point in the investigation, no evidence of foul play had been identified. That sentence, no foul play identified, is worth pausing on because it did an enormous amount of work in shaping how this story spread. To investigators, that phrase typically means exactly what it says. At this early stage, nothing gathered so far points to a crime. It is not a final conclusion. It is not a clearance. It is a snapshot of where an active investigation stands on day one. But to a national audience watching a black teenager's death get described that quickly as accidental in a state with Mississippi's specific and well-documented history, that same sentence read very differently. We're not going to pretend that tension doesn't exist in this story, because it's one of the central reasons this case became what it became. We'll come back to it directly later in this video, because it deserves more than a passing mention. What we can tell you with confidence is what happened procedurally after that first statement. The sheriff's office did not close the case. Over the following weeks, Investigators conducted interviews with roughly 60 witnesses, according to reporting from the Sun-Herald and confirmed by Sheriff Ledbetter directly to CNN. The 3 friends who had traveled with Nolan on the boat to Horn Island were, according to the sheriff, interviewed in depth. The FBI became involved to assist with examining digital evidence, a detail that matters because Horn Island sits on federal land, which gives federal authorities jurisdiction alongside the local sheriff's office. That is not, to be clear, the same thing as the FBI taking the case away from Jackson County. It's a partnership, the kind local departments routinely use when a case crosses into federal territory or requires forensic resources a small county office doesn't have in-house. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office also made a public appeal that tells you something important about the state of the evidence at that point. They asked anyone who had been on the northwestern tip of Horn Island that day to come forward with original, unedited photographs and video, specifically anything that might depict an altercation or anything involving Nolan himself. Think about what that request actually means. Investigators were, in effect, telling the public that with several hundred people on that stretch of sand, they still didn't have a complete visual record of Nolan's final hours. That gap, the space between hundreds of witnesses were physically present, and investigators still don't have a clear picture, is the engine that's driven almost every theory this case has produced. Nolan's family, meanwhile, wasn't waiting quietly for that gap to close on its own. Within days of his body being found, they retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump. If that name sounds familiar, it's because Crump has represented families in some of the highest profile police violence and civil rights cases of the past 15 years. His firm released a statement making the family's position clear. They were calling for a thorough and transparent investigation into how Nolan died, and they would not rest until every fact surrounding his death on Horn Island was brought into the light. That decision to bring in outside legal representation is worth understanding on its own terms, because it gets misread constantly online. Hiring an attorney at this stage in a death investigation isn't an accusation against anyone. It's a mechanism. Families do this to make sure they're kept informed as an investigation moves, to pressure agencies toward transparency, to potentially pursue an independent autopsy, and to preserve their legal options if the facts eventually point somewhere that requires civil action. None of that presumes what the facts will show. It just means a grieving family wasn't willing to sit on the sidelines of the investigation into their own son's death. And given what would unfold over the following weeks regarding communication breakdowns between the family and law enforcement, it's hard to argue that decision wasn't at minimum understandable. If you want to understand why this case has held national attention for over a month instead of fading after the first week, you have to understand the physical evidence that's actually been verified, separate from everything that's been alleged, rumored, or manufactured online. There are 3 pieces of it that matter more than anything else: the boat's GPS data, a recorded distress call, and Nolan's cell phone. Let's start with the GPS data, because it's the most objectively verifiable piece of the entire timeline. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released tracking information for the boat Nolan traveled to the island on, and multiple outlets, including CBS News, obtained and published it. According to that data, the boat departed the mainland dock at 9:56 a.m. and reached Horn Island at 11:14 a.m. Nolan's friends have said, in various public statements, that the last confirmed sighting of him on the island was sometime that afternoon. The boat itself left Horn Island later that evening and, according to the GPS records, arrived back at the mainland dock at 5:44 p.m. That gap between whenever Nolan was last reliably seen and the boat's 5:44 p.m. return is where almost every unanswered question in this case lives. It's not a small gap. Depending on which account of Nolan's last sighting you're working from, it stretches anywhere from roughly 90 minutes to over 2 hours. A lot can happen on a crowded island in that window. A lot can also happen that nobody witnesses on an island with several hundred people spread across an unstructured stretch of sand and water with no cameras and no infrastructure. The second piece is the distress call. Multiple outlets, including NBC News, obtained audio connecting to a call one of Nolan's friends made that afternoon, apparently to a private towing service, reporting that their boat was taking on water. You can hear a voice saying they're sinking and asking for help, and a dispatcher asking whether everyone aboard is accounted for and in good health, with a voice responding in the affirmative. This recording has become one of the single most argued over pieces of evidence in the entire case, because it establishes in real time that something mechanical was genuinely going wrong with the boat that afternoon, which lines up with public statements from at least one parent connected to the friend group describing a bilge pump failure that forced an early, unplanned departure from the island. We want to be very careful here, because this is exactly the kind of moment where speculation tends to run ahead of what a recording can actually prove. The call establishes that a boat malfunction happened. It does not by itself establish where Nolan physically was at the moment that call was placed, whether he was still with the group at that point, or what everyone's on board meant to the person saying it in the middle of an actual emergency. Investigators have access to the full, unedited version of that audio and the broader digital evidence connected to it. The public has access to short clips. Those are not the same thing. And this channel isn't going to pretend they are just because a short clip is more dramatic to react to. The third piece is Nolan's phone. And this is where the story gets genuinely complicated, because it sits at the intersection of grief, suspicion, and some legitimately unusual circumstances. Nolan did not have his phone with him when he was last seen, according to his mother. The family used the location tracking app Life 360 to locate the device after he was reported missing, and it led them to the home of one of the friends he'd been with that day. When Christine and her sister eventually went through the phone, she has publicly stated that she found something that troubled her: 2 Snapchat accounts with no saved photos or videos from July 4th, despite Nolan being, by every account from people who knew him, an extremely active user of the app who documented gatherings constantly. Snapchat content typically remains accessible within the app for roughly 24 hours before it disappears on its own, and Christine has said she and her sister opened the phone within that window and still found nothing saved from that day. That detail, an account that goes suddenly and completely silent on the exact day its owner disappears, is the kind of thing that deserves a real, documented explanation rather than a shrug. It is also, to be fair and precise about it, not proof of tampering on its own. Apps can fail to sync. Content can fail to save for entirely mundane technical reasons. Investigators with forensic access to that device can determine, with far more certainty than any of us watching from the outside, whether that silence reflects something deliberate or something explainable. As of this recording, that determination hasn't been made public. What we can tell you is what happened to the phone procedurally, because it became its own small controversy. For weeks, the device remained in the possession of Crump's independent investigative team rather than the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Crump has publicly confirmed this and described the phone as a key piece of evidence. Eventually, following a meeting between the family and Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath, both sides agreed to something described as a mutual inspection, meaning law enforcement's forensic experts and the family's independent experts would examine the device's data extraction together in the same room at the same time, so that neither side could claim the other had withheld or selectively presented what was recovered. Attorney Eric Hertz, who has led the family's independent investigative team alongside Crump, said he expected the FBI to be present for that examination as well. Legal analysts who've spoken publicly about this case have described that arrangement as genuinely unusual. It is not standard practice for a victim's family to participate directly in law enforcement's forensic examination of evidence. Whether that arrangement helps establish trust in the eventual findings or creates chain of custody questions down the road if this case ever reaches a courtroom is something only time, and possibly a defense attorney someday, will answer. We need to spend real time on this next section, because it's genuinely one of the most important parts of this story, and it's also the part where this channel refuses to just repeat what went viral without checking whether any of it held up. Within days of Nolan's death becoming national news, a photograph began circulating that appeared to show him at a pool party, surrounded by a group of people, at a location and time nobody could initially verify. A Facebook post attached to that image made an extraordinary claim: that Nolan had actually made it back from Horn Island alive, that he'd attended this party, that an altercation broke out, that he was beaten, and that his body was later returned to the water. The post came from an account Nolan's mother has stated she had never spoken to and had never met. The photo itself was uploaded by an Instagram account with fewer than 1,000 followers, and it was deleted shortly after posting. Within hours, it had reached hundreds of thousands of viewers anyway. Ben Crump reposted the image to his own social media. To a huge portion of the audience that saw it, that repost read as confirmation from the family's own attorney that the theory was credible. But if you actually read Crump's caption in full, rather than just the image attached to it, he was explicit that he did not know whether the underlying claims were fact or rumor, and that his team was following every lead until the truth was established. That distinction between amplifying a lead to generate tips and confirming a fact matters enormously, and it's a distinction that got lost almost immediately in how the image spread. The claim did not survive scrutiny. Rolling Stone published photo metadata from an independent source establishing that the image had actually been taken on June 27th, 8 full days before Nolan ever set foot on that boat to Horn Island. The party had taken place in Pass Christian, Mississippi, weeks before Independence Day. A friend of Nolan's, who was interviewed separately by both Rolling Stone and ABC News, identified the people in the photo, including Nolan, and confirmed the correct date. According to that friend's account, the photo had been uploaded as part of an unrelated batch of older pictures on July 5th, meaning the date it was posted online and the date the photograph was actually taken were two completely different things, and a huge swath of the internet never stopped to check which one mattered. Correcting that record matters, and we want to be extremely clear about why we're spending time on it in this video, instead of just moving past it. A false claim like that one doesn't just waste attention. It actively damages the credibility of everything else being said about this case, including the parts that genuinely deserve scrutiny. Every time a piece of misinformation like this gets debunked publicly, it makes the next legitimate question that much easier for skeptics to dismiss along with it. That a real cost, and it's one this family has had to absorb on top of everything else they're carrying. The second major piece of misinformation involved a video. Footage circulated online appearing to capture a heated argument on a boat near Horn Island, with a voice that could be heard demanding, essentially, the return of a phone. For a period of time, that clip was treated across social media and repeated in some press conferences as possible evidence that Nolan himself had been recorded in a dispute shortly before he disappeared. The person in that video eventually spoke publicly and put an end to the speculation. Identified in reporting as a close friend of Nolan's, Trayston Shepard, he told ABC News directly that the yelling voice belonged to him, not to Nolan, and that the confrontation captured on video involved him and a completely separate individual, unrelated to Nolan at all. Shepard gave an official statement to the Jackson County Sheriff's Department confirming this account on the record with investigators, not just to reporters. Crump himself has since publicly acknowledged the conflicting accounts around that clip and said his team would be more careful going forward to specify when a claim comes from a single witness rather than presenting it as established fact. We want to give Shepard real credit here, because it would have been easy for him to stay silent. He has said publicly that he and members of his friend group have received death threats since Nolan's body was found, correcting a viral claim that had already spread to millions of people using his own name, while actively receiving threats over his connection to this story, is not a small thing to do. Whatever else remains unresolved in this case, that particular act of on-the-record honesty deserves to be acknowledged rather than buried under everything louder happening around it. The third piece of misinformation is, honestly, the most disturbing one, and it says something troubling about where this entire online ecosystem has gone. Fabricated, AI-generated videos of Christine Wells Wansley herself began circulating online. Footage built to look like the grieving mother, saying things she never said, while she was actively planning her son's funeral. Crump addressed this publicly and directly, calling it out for exactly what it is. Nobody's life should be threatened for seeking the truth, he said, and fabricated content attacking a mother in the middle of unimaginable grief crosses a line that shouldn't need to be explained to anyone. Sit with that for a second, because it's easy to scroll past a line like that without absorbing what it actually describes. A mother is coordinating a funeral for her 18-year-old son. She is fighting, in parallel, for access to an incident report she is legally entitled to under Mississippi law. She is sitting through press conference after press conference trying to hold herself together in front of national cameras. And somewhere out there, entirely separate from any of that, someone is using artificial intelligence to manufacture footage of her purely to generate engagement off her grief. If there's a single detail in this entire case that should make you angry at the internet rather than at any specific person connected to the investigation, it's that one. All right, we need to pause here for just a second because this next part matters. If your blood is a little hot right now after hearing about AI-generated videos of a grieving mother, channel that energy into something that actually helps this kind of reporting keep reaching people. Comment the word salmon down below right now. Yes, exactly like the fish, tied back to that dinner Nolan cooked his parents the night before he left. We want to see how many of you are actually paying attention to who Nolan was as a person, and not just the headlines built around his death. Drop Sam in the comments, and let's keep going, because the autopsy findings are next, and they raise more questions than they answer. On July 22nd, at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago, Ben Crump stood beside Christine and Elmore and announced the preliminary results of an independent autopsy the family had commissioned. This was the moment a huge portion of this case's audience had been waiting for. It did not deliver the clarity anyone was hoping for, and understanding exactly why it didn't is essential to understanding where this case actually stands right now. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a forensic pathologist based in Washington, D.C., with no professional or institutional ties to Mississippi. Nolan's body had been transported there specifically so the family could obtain an examination fully independent of the state. According to the report Crump read from at that press conference, Dr. Mitchell's finding on both the cause and the manner of Nolan's death was the same word, twice over: undetermined, pending further investigation. That phrase deserves to be unpacked carefully, because it is doing an enormous amount of work in this case, and it gets flattened online into something far more dramatic than what it actually says. Undetermined does not mean suspicious. It does not mean foul play. It does not mean accident. It means, in the most literal and technical sense available to forensic pathology, that the available evidence was not sufficient to reach a conclusion in either direction. That is a genuinely different statement than most people assume when they hear it. So why couldn't Dr. Mitchell reach a conclusion? The report itself lays out several specific limitations, and each one matters on its own. First, timing. By the time Dr. Mitchell examined Nolan's body, roughly 2.5 weeks had passed since it was recovered from the water. Decomposition over that time frame can obscure injuries, bruising, and other physical evidence that might otherwise have told a clearer story. This isn't a criticism of anyone's handling of the case. It's simply the reality of what happens to human tissue over time, and it's precisely why independent autopsies conducted weeks after an initial state examination face inherent scientific limits that a first examination doesn't. Second, and more significantly, the state's initial autopsy had already retained certain organs and tissue for its own examination, a common and standard practice in forensic pathology, where pathologists remove tissue to study it more closely rather than relying solely on external or in situ observation. But it meant that by the time Dr. Mitchell conducted his exam, part of Nolan's throat had already been removed and was not present for him to examine directly. Crump has said the family's team is actively working to obtain that tissue for further study. Doctors interviewed by ABC News confirmed that this kind of gap between a first and second autopsy is not unusual, but it does make a second examination meaningfully harder to conduct than the first one ever was. Third, toxicology. At the time of the independent autopsy, toxicology results were not yet available, meaning Dr. Mitchell had no information about what, if anything, was in Nolan's system at the time of his death, a detail that can be critical in cases involving open water, alcohol, or any combination of factors affecting a person's ability to swim or stay conscious. Because of those combined limitations, Dr. Mitchell could not determine whether Nolan was conscious when he entered the water. He could not determine how he ended up in the water in the first place. He cannot directly observe Nolan's lungs to assess water intake in the way an examination closer to the time of death might have allowed, and he cannot examine the contents of his stomach. Crump has described that missing information, what state Nolan was in before he entered the water, as, in his words, the crux of the entire matter. Everything else in this case, in a real sense, radiates outward from that single unanswered question. The report didn't note one specific physical finding: red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. This detail has circulated widely online, often stripped of the context that immediately follows it in the actual report. Dr. Mitchell's own documentation states plainly that it is not clear what caused that discoloration or whether it has any connection to Nolan's death at all. It could indicate an impact. It could reflect decomposition-related changes to tissue after weeks in warm coastal water. It could be something else entirely. As of this recording, nobody with the authority to make that determination has made it publicly. We want to be honest with you about what that single line, the one you heard in our cold open, that Dr. Mitchell could not rule out non-accidental factors, actually represents, because it's a sentence that's driven a huge amount of this case's national attention, and it deserves to be understood precisely rather than sensationalized. It is not a statement that something non-accidental happened. It is a statement of the evidence available to this particular pathologist, working weeks after the fact, with incomplete tissue and no toxicology, could not eliminate that possibility. That is a genuinely lower bar than most viewers assume, and it's also, in fairness to the family, exactly why they wanted an outside expert examining their son's body in the first place. An undetermined finding isn't nothing. It's also not the confirmation either side of this national conversation has been treating it as. Crump has said publicly that he hopes the Mississippi Medical Examiner's Office will share its own photographs and findings from the state's original autopsy with Dr. Mitchell, so the independent review can be conducted with full information rather than the significant gaps it currently faces. That request, as of this recording, has not been publicly confirmed as fulfilled. Here's where this case takes a turn that has frustrated almost everyone watching it, regardless of what they believe happened to Nolan Wells. On July 30th, officials confirmed to NBC News that the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office had completed its official autopsy. This was the first autopsy conducted, performed just one day after Nolan's body was found. Weeks before the independent examination, Dr. Mitchell would later perform. In theory, this is a report closest to Nolan's actual condition at the time of death, conducted with the least decomposition and the fullest access to the body. The findings have not been made public. As of this recording, they still have not. District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath addressed this directly in a statement released on July 23rd, before the state autopsy was even confirmed complete, explaining the reasoning behind withholding it. Every death in the county, she said, aside from those attributed to natural causes or non-criminal car accidents, is presented to a grand jury as a matter of standard procedure, a practice she said her office has followed throughout her entire career, regardless of how much public attention any individual case receives. In her words, these rules exist to search for the truth, not to prevent it. She has stated that the timeline the family and public are wading through is not arbitrary, but reflects the actual work the investigation requires. We want to give that explanation a fair hearing, because it's important context that often gets lost in coverage of this case. A grand jury review before public release is, genuinely, standard practice in a great many jurisdictions for exactly this category of death: sudden, unnatural, and requiring a formal determination of whether a crime occurred. It is not, on its face, evidence of anything being hidden. Prosecutors routinely argue that releasing findings before a grand jury reviews them risks tainting the jury pool, compromising witness testimony, or giving anyone with something to hide the chance to adjust their story before it's tested under oath. At the same time, we'd be doing you a disservice if we pretended that explanation fully resolves the frustration surrounding this delay, because it doesn't, and the family has said so directly and repeatedly. Under Mississippi law, crime victims and their families are entitled to receive an incident report within 72 hours of a death. That window passed weeks ago. Christine has said publicly that the last direct contact she received from the sheriff's department for a significant stretch of this investigation was a single text message, one she initiated herself, simply asking for an update. More than a week went by during an active death investigation into her own son, with essentially no proactive communication from the lead investigating agency. The DA's office has since said it will serve as a primary point of contact going forward, with a dedicated victim advocate assigned to the family. And Christine has said she appreciates that shift, but she has also been clear that she is not pretending the earlier gap didn't happen, and this channel isn't going to pretend it didn't either. So here's where the case sits mechanically as of this recording. The official state autopsy is complete but sealed. The independent autopsy is inconclusive and openly says so. Toxicology results connected to at least one of those examinations are still pending. And all of it, every document, every recorded interview, every piece of digital evidence recovered so far, is being assembled for eventual presentation to a Jackson County grand jury, a body of ordinary citizens who will be asked, behind closed doors, whether the evidence supports moving forward with formal charges. It's worth being precise about what a grand jury referral does and does not mean, because this is another detail that gets flattened online into something more dramatic than it actually is. A grand jury hearing a case is not the same thing as charges being filed. It is not a trial. It is a closed-door process where prosecutors present evidence to a panel of citizens who decide, essentially, whether probable cause exists to move forward. And legal analysts covering this case have been careful to note that a referral of this kind doesn't automatically mean homicide is even the category of charge under consideration. It could involve accusations connected to obstruction, evidence tampering, or false statements, just as plausibly as it could involve anything related directly to Nolan's death. It's also entirely possible that after reviewing everything, a grand jury declines to indict anyone at all, and this case is ultimately closed without charges. Nobody outside that closed room, not this channel, not any journalist covering this story, not even the family's own legal team, currently knows which of those outcomes is coming. Before we move into the harder, more contested parts of the story, the friend accounts, the timeline gap, the parts of this case where people disagree with each other on the actual record, we need one more second of your time. If everything you've heard so far has made you as frustrated as it's made us putting this together, the most useful thing you can do isn't just to feel that frustration and scroll on. Subscribe to this channel right now, because we're going to be here the moment that grand jury actually moves, whether that's next week or next year. And we'd rather you hear from a channel that's been tracking every document instead of catching a headline 3 days late somewhere else. All right, let's talk about what happened on that island. This is the section of the video where we have to be the most careful, because it's also the section where this case has generated the most public speculation. And speculation is exactly what this channel refuses to dress up as confirmed fact. Every name we mention in this section belongs to someone who has either spoken on the record voluntarily or who exists in official reporting connected to this case. Nobody discussed here has been charged with a crime, and nothing in this section should be read as an accusation. Here is what's actually contested. According to public statements attributed to the family and their legal team, one account holds that Nolan's friends were encouraging him to wrap up a conversation he was having with a young woman on the island so the group could return together, and that Nolan told the group he intended to catch a different ride back rather than leave with them immediately. A separate account, relayed to the young woman's own family rather than from the young woman herself directly, holds that Nolan told her he was planning to head back toward a boat he'd originally arrived on. Those two versions genuinely conflict with each other on a basic, specific point. Which direction did Nolan say he was going in the final conversation anyone has confirmed having with him? We want to flag something important about how that second account has entered the public record, because it matters for how much weight it should carry. The young woman involved does not, to our knowledge, given a direct, on-the-record interview to any major outlet describing what happened in her own words. What circulated publicly has come through a family member speaking on her behalf. That's a real, documented human account, and it deserves to be taken seriously. But it is also functionally secondhand information filtered through grief, protectiveness, and the pressure of having a relative unexpectedly thrust into a national news story. Holding both of those things at once, that the account is real and that it hasn't been independently verified to the person who actually lived it, is exactly the kind of nuance this case demands and rarely gets online. Set against that is Trayston Shepard's account, the same friend who publicly clarified the viral video wasn't Nolan's voice. Shepard has said, in interviews with multiple outlets including CNN and ABC News, that he last saw Nolan sometime after 4 in the afternoon, and that Nolan had left his phone behind on the boat, the same as many others in the group had done that day. He's also made a broader, more personal statement, describing Nolan as someone who, in his experience, never stayed behind while his friends left. If he rode somewhere with you, Shepard has said, he came back with you every single time. That's not physical evidence. It's a character observation from someone who genuinely knew him, but it's also an observation that directly complicates the version of events in which Nolan simply, casually, chose to stay behind that day like it was any other decision an 18-year-old makes on a beach. There's a smaller detail that stuck with a lot of people following this case closely, and it's worth including here because it doesn't fit neatly into either narrative. It just sits there unresolved. Jackson County incident reports reportedly listed Nolan as wearing black shorts on the day he disappeared. His mother has said that photos from that day, shared with her by someone who had been on the island, show him wearing blue swim trunks instead. It's the kind of detail that could easily be an honest error. People misremember clothing constantly, especially when describing someone's secondhand hours or days after an already chaotic afternoon. It's also the kind of detail that shouldn't require a grieving mother to go digging through photograph herself in order to catch and flag it to investigators. A similar dynamic surrounds Nolan's car keys, which had been left at a friend's house rather than returned to the family directly. According to accounts from a family, retrieving them required Nolan's father go to that friend's home himself and specifically asking for them, rather than the keys simply being brought to the family the way you might expect in the aftermath of a tragedy involving someone this close to the group. The same pattern repeated with the phone, which the family located themselves using a tracking app rather than receiving it proactively from whoever had it. We want to be fair and balanced about how we frame this, because it's easy to slide into treating things weren't handed over automatically as proof of something sinister, and that's not a conclusion the evidence currently supports. There are entirely mundane explanations for all of these gaps. A chaotic, traumatic day where nobody was thinking clearly about logistics, teenagers unsure of the right protocol for friends' belongings, genuine confusion in the immediate aftermath of a tragedy nobody was prepared for. There are also less innocent explanations, and investigators, not this channel, are the ones with the tools and legal authority to determine which one actually applies. What we can tell you, honestly, is that these details are documented. They are part of the public record of how this family has described their experience, and they are part of why trust between this family and the investigation broke down as early and as thoroughly as it did. There's one more piece of this section that deserves real care, because it involves real people who have not been charged with anything and who have publicly and repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. In the weeks following this case's escalation into national news, at least one attorney representing some of the young men who were with Nolan that day publicly stated that his clients had nothing to do with whatever happened, and pushed back forcefully against what he characterized as unfounded accusations circulating online. Those young men have described Nolan as being close to them, essentially like a brother, and have expressed genuine grief over his death, alongside frustration at being treated in public discourse as suspects in a case where no charges have been filed against anyone. We are choosing deliberately not to walk through every specific claim and counterclaim that's circulated about those individuals in this video, because a significant amount of what's spread online about them, including alleged audio manipulation, unverified secondhand account of altercations, and speculation about motive, has not been independently confirmed by law enforcement or by credible reporting we can stand behind. Naming private individuals in connection with unproven, inflammatory claims is exactly the kind of thing this channel has committed to never doing, and we're not going to break that standard just because a case is trending. If formal charges are ever filed against anyone in connection with Nolan's death, we will cover that development directly, honestly, and with the same sourcing discipline you're watching right now. Until then, we're not going to do their thinking for a grand jury that hasn't met yet. We would be leaving out something essential about this case if we didn't address, directly and honestly, why it became a national story at all, rather than tragic but largely local news item confined to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Nolan Wells was one of very few black attendees at a gathering that, by most photographic accounts from that day, was overwhelmingly white. He disappeared from that gathering. His body was recovered 2 days later, and the initial public statement from local authorities, delivered less than 24 hours after his body was found, was that there was no evidence of foul play. For a significant portion of the public watching this unfold, especially in black communities across the country, that sequence of events landed inside a much older, much heavier historical context, a long, well-documented pattern in which black deaths in the American South, and particularly in Mississippi, have been investigated with less scrutiny, less urgency, and less transparency than deaths involving white victims. Members of Congress, including Georgia Representative Lucy McBath, who has her own devastating personal history with the loss of a child to violence, publicly called for a full federal investigation into Nolan's death, framing it explicitly within that broader national pattern. Civil rights organizers, including Reverend Al Sharpton, stood alongside the family at multiple press conferences, drawing direct comparisons to prior cases where they argued official investigations moved too slowly or accepted convenient early conclusions without sufficient scrutiny. We're not going to tell you what to think about that framing, because that's not this channel's job, and it's genuinely a question that deserves more room than a true crime documentary can give it. What we can tell you is that this tension between an investigation that, by its own account, followed standard early-stage procedure, and a family and a broader community whose lived experience gives them real, historically grounded reasons to distrust that standard procedure, is not a distraction from this case. It is one of the central forces actually driving it. The sheriff's office has maintained throughout that it is treating this investigation seriously, and that its early statement reflected the evidence available at that specific moment, not a predetermined conclusion. The family has maintained throughout that they are not accusing anyone of a specific crime, only demanding the same thoroughness and transparency that any family would want for their own child. Both of those things can be sincerely held, and both of them, in this case, have coexisted uneasily for over a month now. There is also a genuinely separate, more troubling thread that emerged as this case gained national visibility, and it deserves to be named plainly. In late July, authorities announced the arrest of a man from California, accused of making an online threat against a Chancery Court judge in Mississippi, whose family has been connected to the broader investigation. State officials, around the same time, publicly warned about a rise in threats connected to this case, and said they were working to crack down on the people making them. Combine that with the death threats Trayston Shepard has said he and his friends have received, and the AI-generated content targeting Christine, and a disturbing pattern emerges that has nothing to do with what actually happened to Nolan Wells, and everything to do with what the internet does to real grief once it goes viral. Whatever your read on the substance of this case, that particular pattern, real people receiving real threats over a case where no charges have even been filed, should trouble every single person watching this video. Let's bring this all the way up to today, because a case like this deserves an honest accounting of exactly where things stand, not a manufactured cliffhanger designed to keep you watching next week's video out of anxiety instead of genuine interest. Both autopsies have now been completed. Neither has produced a public conclusion about how Nolan Wells died. The state's report sits sealed, awaiting presentation to a Jackson County grand jury. Per standard procedure, the district attorney's office says it applies to every non-natural death in the county. The independent report commissioned by the family says, in its own words, undetermined, pending further investigation, a finding driven by decomposition, missing tissue, and toxicology results that weren't yet available at the time of the exam. The FBI remains involved in an assisting capacity, focused primarily on digital forensics tied to phones, video, and audio evidence gathered so far. Investigators have interviewed roughly 60 witnesses. a mutual, joint inspection of Nolan's phone has been agreed to between the family's legal team and the district attorney's office. Though as of this recording, we have not seen public confirmation that examination has actually taken place. Crump's team continues to work with independent oceanic engineering experts, attempting to understand how and why Nolan's body was recovered in roughly the same location where he was last seen, a detail that, on its own, doesn't prove anything, but that investigators clearly consider worth understanding scientifically rather than dismissing. Two pieces of viral misinformation, the pool party photo and the argument video, have been publicly incredibly debunked, thanks in large part to independent reporting and to a friend willing to correct the record using his own name at real personal risk to himself. Fabricated, AI-generated content targeting Nolan's mother continues to circulate, alongside real threats against real people connected to this case, none of whom have been charged with anything. A grand jury has not yet convened. No charges have been filed against anyone. Nolan Wells' manner and cause of death remain officially unresolved. That's not a satisfying place to end a video. We know that, but we'd rather leave you with the honest, unfinished truth of where this case actually stands and manufacture a false sense of resolution just to give the story a tidier ending than it currently has. Nolan's parents don't get the comfort of a tidy ending right now either. Neither should we. If we're being honest with you, we're at the part of the video where we usually ask you to comment a specific word, and this time we want you to really think about it before you type it. Everything you just heard, 2 autopsies, 5 weeks, and the word undetermined written twice, comes down to one thing this family still doesn't have. If that sits with you the way it's sitting with us right now, comment the word answers below. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's genuinely the only thing Christine and Elmore have said over and over in every single interview they've given. They're not asking for a verdict. They're asking for answers. Type it below, and let's finish this the right way. There's a version of this story that would have been easier to tell you. It would have picked a side early, built a villain out of whichever account fit the narrative best, and wrapped everything up with a confident conclusion by the halfway mark. We're not interested in making that video. And honestly, we don't think you're interested in watching it, or you wouldn't have sat through this one instead of a 5-minute reaction clip somewhere else. What we're left with instead is something harder, and we'd argue something more honest. A young man who cooked dinner for his parents and told his mother he loved her on his way out the door. A holiday weekend that several hundred people shared, and that somehow still doesn't have a clear, agreed-upon account of his final hours. 2 separate medical examinations conducted by 2 separate experts, both of which ended in the same word, undetermined. A family that has done everything within their power, hiring independent counsel, commissioning an outside autopsy, sitting through press conference after press conference, absorbing threats and fabricated videos and a wave of internet speculation they never asked for, and still, 5 weeks later, doesn't have the one thing they've asked for from the very beginning. If you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Somewhere between a boat leaving Horn Island at 4:31 in the afternoon and arriving back at the dock at 5:44, something happened to Nolan Xavier Wells that nobody outside that gap has been able to explain. Not the sheriff's office, not the state medical examiner, not an independent pathologist working with no ties to Mississippi at all, not the family's own investigators, working with former federal agents and receiving tips by the dozens every single day. Whatever eventually comes out of that grand jury room, an indictment, a declination, or something in between, the honest starting point for all of it is the same one we're leaving you with tonight. Nobody knows yet. And the people who deserve to know most are the 2 parents who are still, every single morning, waking up to a hole in their family that no press conference and no autopsy report has been able to fill. Before we close this video out, here's the honest breakdown, laid out plainly, of exactly where this case stands. Confirmed, Nolan Wells, 18, disappeared from Horn Island, Mississippi on July 4th, 2026, during a holiday gathering with friends. His body was recovered on July 6th by a National Park Service ranger, identified through dental records. A multi-agency search involving the Coast Guard, the National Park Service, and Mississippi Department of Marine Resources took place over the 2 days he was missing. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office initially reported no evidence of foul play. The family retained attorney Ben Crump and commissioned an independent autopsy, conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell, which returned an undetermined cause and manner of death. The state autopsy has been completed but remains sealed pending grand jury review per the district attorney's stated standard procedure. The FBI is assisting with digital forensics. A pool party photo and an argument video that circulated as potential evidence have both been credibly debunked. A man was arrested for making an online threat against a judge connected to the case. AI-generated content targeting Nolan's mother has circulated online. Disputed. The exact circumstances under which Nolan became separated from his friend group on the island, including which direction he told others he was heading, whether the red discoloration noted on the back of Nolan's head is connected in any way to his death, the extent to which delayed communication from law enforcement reflected standard procedure versus a genuine breakdown in transparency. Unknown, Nolan Wells' official cause of death, his manner of death, what happened during the roughly 90-minute to 2-hour window between his last confirmed sighting and the boat's return to the mainland, whether any criminal charges will result from the grand jury's eventual review, why his Snapchat account showed no saved content from July 4th. That's the case, honestly laid out as it stands today. We'll be back the moment this grand jury actually moves, whether that's an indictment, a declination, or another month of silence, because that's the only kind of update worth putting in front of you. If this video gave you something the reaction channels didn't, actual sourcing, actual honesty about what we don't know, actual care for a family that's still living inside this every single day, then do us a real favor and subscribe before you go. We've said it a few times tonight because it's true. A lot more of you are watching these updates than are actually subscribed to catch the next one. And we genuinely rather have you here for the ending of this story than have you stumble back into it by accident months from now. Rest easy, Nolan. This channel isn't going anywhere until his family gets what they've been asking for since the very first day. We'll see you in the next one.